The Committee for Local Government will now come to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call roll?
Chair Faulkner,
Here.
Vice Chair Reedy, Representatives Adams, Behringer, Berger, Fischel, Gray, Hudson, Murphy, Perkins, Railsback, Walsh-Moore, West.
There is a quorum here. We will now get started. Representative Kidd, would you come forward and we'll hear Bill 2419.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Representative Bill Kidd, District 20. Good morning, Chair, Committee. Everybody got their coffee? Everybody ready to go? I'd stirred up a little wasp nest here with some unintended consequences. So I'll start out with that to say, I'm sure there's some folks back here or some in your districts that may have had some conversations with you. And so I'm going to tell you right up front, my bill is open to change. Okay? So if you are going to attack certain parts of it, hey, we're open to change, because one of the things I hate when we do legislation is we think we've got it right 90% of the time, but it's those 10% unintended consequences that always come back and get you. So we'll work on the 10% of the unintended consequences, tell you right now. Simply, my bill says that there are two places, I think, in the state that when you sell a house, you have to have a disclosure of what you paid for the house. And that disclosure, it happens to be in the county I'm in. Jackson County is one of those. And I don't think that I should be having to disclose what I sell my property for. That's my private personal business. And if the assessor wants to come out and look at my house, they can come out and look at my house and assess what it's worth, but I don't need to tell them that I just sold that house for $50 or $500,000. I don't want their decisions based on that. So I want to make sure that when so what my bill does, it says disclosure of the sales price. This is on the second page, line 20. The deed, mortgage, conveyance, none of that has to be disclosed, so that my private business is my private business. Right now in Jackson County, when you sell a house, you have to fill out a form and affidavits, and the title company has to send that in, what you paid for the house, or what you sold the house for. So it does away with that, first of all. That's my private business. And then secondly, the most controversial part of this was I got some complaints this year, which I did not know, that it is not illegal for the assessors or their agents to come onto your property, and they are not subject to trespassing laws. Now, I always thought that was interesting, because if you're a police officer, you can't come on your property unless you're in the pursuit of a felon or to protect a third party, the life of someone else. But the assessor can walk around the back of your house, measure your house, do whatever they want. They can look in your sheds, they can do anything, and they're not subject to trespass law. I object to that, personally. However, I've noticed that when I did that, I have probably some assessors back here in the back that are going to tell you about, they have 32,000 pieces to assess in their county, and there's one of them. Or maybe there's two of them. Or maybe there's one in the field and one back at the office. They just don't have the staff. My bill said, hey, you can't, we're going to make you subject to trespass laws. You can't go on that property without permission of the landowner. Sounds simple enough until we started realizing them getting some phone calls like, well, who is the landowner? Who's required to disclose who the landowner is? Is it an LLC? Is it managed by a management company? Is it a renter? Can the renter give you permission? Who is the actual owner of the house? How do we find them? Because right now, I don't believe we have any way that we can track. I don't think in some of these counties about who owns the house and how to get and what the contact information is. What if the contact information changes? That's a rental house, and I'm the owner and I've moved, or my phone died and I get a new phone. They gave me a new number. How do we track down the owner of the house? So logistics-wise, even though my intent is to say I don't like people trespassing on my property without my permission, my personal thing is I don't think that should be allowed. The practical thing is, how do we allow the assessors to do their job and yet not allow them on your property? So I'm open to suggestions, changes, however we would do that. My bill is really unrealistic when it says has to get permission from the obtained from the landowner. I realize that's unrealistic. So I don't know if I just killed some testimony from behind me or not, but I bet it did. And that's why I said I'm willing to change that. I've had some really good talks with Representative Reedy, who was a previous assessor, who came in very nicely, told me that my bill sucked in that regard. I don't, you know, so I'm open to how do we, what I discovered was that a good assessor will not trespass on your property, okay? A good assessor will make an attempt to knock on the door, to inform you they're there, and to get your permission and allow you to know, okay? Those are the good assessors. And I believe that 99% of the assessors in this state are good assessors. They understand if I trespass on your property and I'm in rural Missouri and I come home and you're behind my house, you're probably going to get shot, okay? So the good assessors make at least reasonable attempts to be on your property. My beef is with the always the 1% that don't do it in a what I would call a kind and considerate manner. So how do we do that? What's the compromise of how do we make sure, how do we clean up the good assessors? How do we make sure that you don't come home and there's somebody behind your house and you shoot them and then you find out, oh, they're the assessor? I don't know. So that's why I'm willing on this part to negotiate or to take it out or to make it county specific. My beef is really with one county. You might be able to guess that county, okay? That's a county where the assessor is appointed, not elected, and we have other issues going on with assessments. So this is a shot at one county, and if they're listening, I hope they are. And if you, the assessors from the state, are behind me and you want to call them or see them at the next convention where you have assessors convention and you want to tell them, please do. Because we want to make sure that assessors like Roger Reedy, who were good assessors, who cared about the people in their county, who realized that not everybody's circumstance is the same and made the appropriate judgment calls, those are the kind of people that I like. Those are the kind of people we're not trying to overrule. It's the bad ones. So with that, help me in figuring that out, that my personal property rights are not violated, yet we allow them to do their job. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for this witness, Representative Murphy?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. You say 1%?
I don't know. I've just picked a number off the top of my head.
I personally think we make too many laws for the worst of us instead of the best of us. So 1% is probably a small number to change a law.
I agree, but the other side of that is I don't want my personal property rights violated either. So it's one of those balancing things we always run into.
It looks to me like this creates kind of a slippery slope. You know, today a lot of assessors are doing property evaluations from the sky. You know, they've got satellites up there, and they're
that's in
checking
counties that can afford that. And I thought the same thing. I agree with you. However, what I found is in small counties that are poor, don't have those resources.
But as technology goes forward, so then are we going to ban drones that fly around the property?
Depends how high up they are and whether I can shoot them with my 12 gauge.
I mean, you know, the whole idea of an assessment is to come up with a true property value, a current date property value. And, you know, your first part of your bill, you say, well, it's no business of anybody who is what I sold my property for. But isn't that the true value of the property?
Depends. What if I sell the house to my son? Okay, and instead of a $400,000 house, I sell it to him for $50,000. Is that the true value?
Goes on the record, and
Shows in the value is 50 now. Is the assessor going to say, oh, that house is worth 50,000?
I think your neighbors would love it because when they do the comparisons to the neighborhood, it's going to bring the whole neighborhood down. Yeah, I mean, you know, I have a neighbor that sold his house way over market value. I mean, it was like $150,000 more than anybody else, and all of a sudden, everybody's taxes went up because they used it as a comparison. Certainly, if they did that with a $50,000 house, it would be a benefit to your neighbors.
You're making the assumption that that is how it's done. I don't believe
That
the
is-
assessor.
that is
maybe
one of
we'll
the
hear
things
from
they do.
assessors whether that goes down a lot, but we may have a different opinion of that.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for the true value, I think market actual selling prices do fall into that because they do comparatives. and it
Good.
is
Then I'm
part
going to sell my house to my son for $5.
Yeah, and I think you'll probably have some tax issues there, but that's fine. But no, I mean, that's your right to do that. They probably won't use it as a comparative market. but-
Exactly, which is the problem. In other words, you're assuming that they might at 50,000, but not at 5. And
Well, but they don't just use one. They use a number of comparatives, and I you know, I
do
like
they do that in
I-
your county?
Do
they do this in your county?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. That's St. Louis County. You know, that's
they do it in yours.
that's certainly behind enemy lines.
Do it in
but,
that one.
you know, they're not going.
Oh, you're St. Louis. Like I said, there are 2 places in the state we do that: St. Louis area, St. Louis City, Kansas City, Jackson County.
But where do we draw the line as to how do you come up with a property value? Then it's just the opinion of the guy that. I mean,
I'll let the assessors here who know that how they do it. I'm not going to assume
yeah,
how they
you know,
come up with
we've
the
gone
property
through
form.
this in committee before, but I mean, they use market data, and you're saying we shouldn't give them any market data.
Okay, if they're going to use market data, then I'm selling my house for $5. Or I'm transferring it into an irrevocable defective trust for $5.
Yeah, I don't think that that's going to be the general rule. I don't, you know, they may look at Bill Kidd and go, hey, he's the oddball.
Well,
Not that
a
anybody
lot of
said-
people do
not
that
anybody
anyway.
would
So
say that. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done here.
I do too. That's why first thing I said was
Appreciate your inquiry.
open to change.
Anyone, any other questions? Representative Hudson,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To inquire, please.
proceed.
Thank you. I wanted to jump in and visit with you just a little bit because I've got to go to another hearing. So when you see me get up and walk
I
out,
get to go to the
you
principal's office.
know. I want to commend you for your willingness to work with folks that have done the job, folks that understand the job, to bring this bill before us and to just openly and honestly say it needs work. These are the issues that I have. How do we deal with them? It's my understanding there are 2 main components to your bill. One is the certificate of value,
Correct.
basically,
Yes.
and you say there are 2 places in the state that have that.
That I
Sa-
know of. There may be
that
more,
you know.
but,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I was an assessor in Stone County for 9 years. We did not have certificate of value. I am, though I'm a former assessor, I'm not a big government guy, and I sympathize with your remark. I don't think it's any of the government's business what I paid for my property. What we would do is we would, when there was a transaction, we'd mail out a letter and we would ask for that information. Some folks chose to send it back in. Some folks didn't. The information that folks willingly gave us, then we would use that to conduct our market studies and come up with the best values that we could to reflect the information that we had on the market. So, you know, and you're wanting to, so if your bill becomes law, it would remove certificate of value in Kansas City,
Yes.
but it would, you're not touching St. Louis, you're just,
no, it would be everywhere.
okay, so you're removing certificate of value from the
Yes.
entire state.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I mean, I don't have a problem with that myself. There may be some of my former colleagues and some folks that do, but I don't. Like I said, I did it for 9 years, didn't have COV. There are some things that I do that I think are, you know, none of the government's business. It's a private transaction between individuals as far as what price is paid for property. But the part of the bill that I would really take issue with is the one that it sounds like you've already been hearing from a lot of people on, and that is you got to get permission to go on the property. Well, another thing that I sympathize with you on is that desire before a government employee steps foot on your property to have you give them, you know, have permission, have them get permission. But the practicality of it just You know, as I said, I did the job for 9 years. We had 30-some thousand real estate parcels. I mean, if this were in place, I don't know how we would have dealt with it. Are you going to have to hire a bunch more staff, you know, and that's going to take resources, and where are you going to get the resources to do that? Going to raise taxes, to ask permission to go on people's property, to potentially raise their property value. Now, there may be some assessors that would guess at the value if they couldn't get a hold of a landowner and couldn't get that permission. Are they going to guess high? I mean, this could have some unintended consequences there as well. But from what I understand, you have heard from folks that see that, and you are more than willing to do something with
Correct.
this.
And I'm open to deleting that section. Okay. I'm open to modifying that to say that's only in charter county 600,000 and above. That way you would know where I'm targeting that. I'm open to modifying that. What I'm trying to balance is personal property rights and the right of the assessor. And I'm not trying to be an undue hardship. I'm not trying to penalize 99.9% of the assessors in the state. Okay, but somewhere in there has to be that balance. Can we achieve it? We may not, and I'm willing to say we can't get there. I understand the assessor has to do their job, so we may come back with a committee substitute and say, X it out. I'm looking for somebody that can say, here's how we can do it, and if we can't get there, then
So
take it out.
would you agree with Representative Murphy, and I don't know his exact words, but if I understood him correctly, he had potential issues with making a law that's really targeted at 1% of, when you got 99% of the folks that it's not a problem.
We do that all the time here. If after 8 years here, you realize that we do target specific, even though our Constitution says I can't geographically target something, but I can sure put enough words in there that you know exactly who I'm talking about. And so, yes, I have a problem with that. That's why I said if we can't figure out a way to balance property rights and the assessor do their job, I'll take this out. I'm not trying to be an undue hardship to the counties of the state, to the assessors of the state. This is not what this is intended to do. I'm looking for ideas to say, how do we balance private property rights and the right of the assessor to do their job?
Respect that. And
if we can't get there, it'll go out.
well, thank you, Representative, for the way that you're approaching this. Wish I could continue to have this conversation, but I'm going to have to get out of here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Representative Walshmore,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To inquire.
proceed.
Thank you.
I can barely see you over there.
Hello. Hi. I know the chair is like right in front of me. Hi. So I just have to kind of piggyback off that. So I know you say you're willing to remove it, but my first question when I read this was, with permission of the landowner to be obtained. Okay, Mr. Reedy comes and knocks on my door. He says, "I'm here to assess your property," and I say, "No." What then? What?
Yeah, I realize the language in there is not workable. The way it's written is not workable, and I will admit that right up front. The permission of the landowner, like I said in my opening statement, was who is it?
Yeah.
How do you know?
Right.
How do you find out? How do you say yes and you're the renter, or
Right.
you're,
Or I'm just visiting.
you're the 17-year-old who opened the door?
Right.
How does the assessor then protect themselves from that and say, hey, I got permission, and then mom comes home and says, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And so I realize that language is unenforceable the way it is. And so I guarantee it's not going to stay like that. I will not move the bill forward until we fix this part or remove it or make it right.
Okay.
It was one of the things I want to do here is make good legislation, not I wanted to say vindictive, although we do that, we get mad and want to take a shot. This is not me being mad at these guys here. And so this is, how do we work it out? If I need to take it out, I will.
Okay. I will take a moment to say, as I represent St. Louis City as well, and so I really appreciate you saying, we shouldn't make vindictive laws that target one entity, and I love this, everyone being so supportive of, we don't go after one particular entity, so that's refreshing as someone who represents the city of St. Louis to hear in this building. So thank you for that. I wanted to thank you and point out, because one thing that alarm bells that went off when I was reading this as well, is with the permission aspect. I appreciate you keeping it only to the assessor. I saw a bill last year that came through the Conservation Committee, and they tried to make it any state employee,
Yeah, that's a
which
whole
was
other deal.
which is a whole nother deal. And in particular, I always want to make sure everyone thinks of DCFS. You know, if they have to have your permission to come anywhere near the property, we get into some real problems against our most valuable citizens. So I do think about that. I'm just curious with the disclosure of the sales price, have you heard from the realtors on this? Just because I'm thinking, like, you know, they mentioned comps for assessing, comps for if it had
Realtors have
disclosed.
comps. There is a certificate of value that you fill out when when there's a property transaction. And,
Right.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people here who are gonna tell you exactly how all that works, but then that goes.
So there will still be a record of what you paid for your house somewhere that's public information.
I guarantee you
That the
Kansas,
realtors-
KCRAR, which is Kansas City Realtor Board, has that transaction somewhere.
Okay.
If you go through a licensed real estate agent. If we do this private and personal, I sell my house to you and I have no agent involved. The title company is sitting there. The title company has to pay for it, but right now that certificate of value goes to the assessor's office or to. I may be wrong on that,
Okay.
or to recorder. I'm not.
I was just wondering, if you remove this, is there's
Having
still
a
a sale
I'm
price
having
with
a
public
senior
record
moment.
somewhere?
Yeah, I'm having a senior moment. It goes
That's
to the
okay.
recorder's office, and the change of title is recorded.
Okay.
Okay,
So yeah, that was my thing was, you know, if you get rid of the
the
disclosure
title
of
is
sales
recorded,
price,
but I'm not sure about the
you
value.
can still find it elsewhere, is what I believe, so.
You could, if you were in Kansas City, if it goes to a real estate transaction, it is recorded on KCRAR. When you are a real estate agent, you do record that. When you put that on the multi-listing service, you do record that sale on there. So you can look up comps as a real estate agent and what's sold around you if the agents are all doing their job and putting the information in, which as an agent you are required to do.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, that's all.
Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Kidd, an assessor is an arm of the government, and there's pretty clear language out there on the violation of our Fourth Amendment rights, you know, as far as illegal search and seizures. I have personally seen assessors or an arm of the assessor's office peering into people's basement windows looking to see if their basements have been finished in newer subdivisions. I actually like this, and I think with some molding we can get some wording in here. But you know, you referenced police earlier, and it's very clear on what a police officer can and can't do when entering upon a person's property. And I feel that the assessor should probably fall under those same guidelines. So there's language out there. We just need to get it in here.
That's what we're here to do.
Yeah, and for the assessors out there, I know not everybody does it. Not all policemen do things wrong either, but sometimes mistakes happen. You know, to vote, you just have to be living in that piece of property. The ownership can be somebody else, but you rent. So because you rent there, you get to vote there. That should fall upon the landlord to put in the lease. Maybe that. I mean, this would be civil down the line, but landlords maybe put in the lease that the owner occupant of the property cannot allow them to come on without permission from the actual landowner. But currently, I mean, if you are occupying a piece of property and you're above the age of 18, 17 or 18, and you give permission for somebody to come on the property, I mean, you know, currently right now, you would never get a trespassing charge if you're invited onto a piece of property. So there's a lot that can be done, and I'd like to work with you on some of this because what you're trying to do here, I do like. I'm not trying to encumber our assessor's office, but there's plenty of laws out there about what you can see above, you know, line of sight, things like that. I'm not opposed to any of that, but when you're walking around people's property, and you're looking in windows, and this happened while I was knocking doors last year. I'm on one side of the street knocking doors, and the assessor's on the other side of the street, peering in people's and then the cops come, I'm like, oh, not me, you know, and it turned out to be the assessor's office. But I'm like, really, we're looking in people's windows to see if their basements are finished so that we can assess more money to their properties. I don't think that's valid. So
Some of the problems we had too.
yeah, and I think this, and that's in St. Charles County. I'm not afraid to say it. That was in St. Charles County. So I'm on board with this. I'd like to make it work. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Representative Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basic to inquire and make a comment.
Proceed.
Thank you, sir. Representative Kidd, you basically said that to Representative Murphy and others that if you sell your property for $5 to your son, that then is the true value. Would that be the true value that you would want your insurance company to write your insurance policy to?
It's not the issue of the day, sir. The issue
Well,
of the day is assessors.
I'm just trying to get to this through a variety of different ways.
And I think you know, sir, that was an analogy that we were using to say that if you want, how do we do the assessor? Do we allow the assessor to know what the value of the property is?
Well,
do we
that's
do
true.
Do we do the assessor's job or not?
What
You know what the
question-
intent of that was.
I'm inquiring. Okay, my next question is then, if you have the assessor assess your property at an unrealistically low value, and that's where the taxes are set, what about everybody else in that community who is paying the realistic rate and their property is realistically assessed? Then you are, in a sense, stealing from all the other people in that community who are paying the taxes at their correct rate, paying for the services. And what I'm saying is that then you are stealing services, i.e. police, i.e. fire, ambulance, or whatever street, then you are absconding with those values.
I would use a different term. I'd use a different term that we use in utilities called rate shifting. You've shifted the rate of all those things over to someone else. That is a true statement, what you've made, but that's not the subject of this bill.
But that would be the consequence
It's not
that you stated. That would be the consequences.
not the consequences. It's not the subject of this bill. It's not how the assessor values your property. That is not the subject of this bill.
Okay, I think it's, I appreciate the fact that the representative is willing to work on this bill. So if we do the questioning on how we could help out with this bill, that I would appreciate that. Representative Official,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To inquire,
proceed.
in 2020, I spent the summer traveling around looking at tax issues in different counties, and Jackson had a horrendous issue. Is this part of the result of that because you don't have an elected assessor, or?
I can only give you a personal opinion. My personal opinion is yes, this whole thing is started to help clean up or correct or make better. Again, this is not at the assessors who are doing it right, but I just got inundated with people who are on fixed incomes, and all of a sudden now their taxes are higher than their house payment was. Their house is paid for. They lived there for 40 years, and all of a sudden now, boom, and then I got calls from people saying, "Do you realize the assessor was in my backyard?" And I thought that, naively, like everybody else, that they were subject to trespass laws. Until I began getting those calls and turned around and said, "Oh, they're not. They can be there." And I had to go back and tell these constituents, no, they can be in your property. They can look in your basement. They're not subject to trespass laws. And I don't know if they're subject to peeping laws. That's a really good question. I bet somebody behind me would answer that.
Mr. Chairman, 2 quick points.
Okay.
Has it improved? That's point 1. Question 1.
I'm not in a position to actually.
Okay, 'cause
I'm
it
an
was a
engineer, so
mess.
you're asking me to take data, and I'm like,
Yeah, okay.
I'm not going to issue it without the data. I don't know.
Okay, to change the bill, just change it where the assessors have to be elected. statewide. That way you're not picking on anybody. I know we talked about this last year.
Yeah, this bill doesn't.
I know,
There
but-
are other two bills that I have that do.
Thank you.
Representative Barringer,
To inquire.
proceed.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
It's hard to see
Yes.
me back here.
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to say that, did I hear you correctly? This would impact the city of St. Louis?
This,
Because the
this
city
would,
isn't a
yes.
charter city, so
there
you're
are
saying this
two-
would impact the city
There are
of St. Louis?
there are two places in the state that I'm aware of that do certificate of values. That's City of St. Louis City, and Jackson County. But I could be wrong on that. And so I'm not going to stand here.
No, that's
there
okay.
are more people that know that.
I know you've said, and that's why I'm going to circle back on this. In the city of St. Louis, we have a really nice website, and you can go under data search property, put an address in. It will give you anything you need to know about my house. You'll
Yeah.
know when I pulled a permit to put a bathroom in. You'll know the current assessed value. You'll know who
I've
paid
heard
for it
nothing but
every year.
good things out of the east side of the state.
Yes. So on that point, because this is a positive thing, Mr. Chair, we have a fantastic bill that's going to be heard in this committee this morning.
Is it by
And
you?
we have some what I would consider some of the top experts in St. Louis region. And while this is a little different from what we're working on this, our other bill, I would say stay here and see if these experts that are here for the next bill could help you and direct you on the best way to handle this. Because
I will.
I think we have some of those people sitting here in this room from St. Louis.
I believe you do too. I've heard nothing but good things. So this is, like I said, this bill is fluid.
Thank you.
Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To inquire quickly, I know we've got other bills coming up, and we've spent quite a little bit of time on this. I echo Representative Hudson's sentiments as far as opinion on certificate of value, but the thing I think you got to realize, we were more from rural counties, from smaller counties, and what you're dealing with is large counties. I believe that certificate of value is in effect also for St. Louis County and St. Charles County, as well as the city of St. Louis and Jackson. That's the four that has certificate of value. Personally, I don't believe that, I believe it's your right to not share that information if you have a private transaction. If it's a private transaction in my district, that does not have to be revealed. One thing that does bother me when it goes into, when these are filed on a county record, they become public information. So anybody can go in and get that information. And so I understand people's rights to keep that private. I don't really have a problem with that. As far as the inspection part of it, or going onto the property, I can tell you in all the years, I didn't look in windows. I didn't do things like that because what would have been looking back at me, and it might not have been safe. And so everybody does things different. But years ago, I think probably Representative Barringer remembers when they had the big scandal about the drive-by assessments in St. Louis. They got all over the St. Louis area assessors because they were driving down the street going, well, that one's worth 40, that one's worth 45, and not going to, and actually getting the data on the property. Correct data is really important. You've got to have correct data if you're going to have a good assessment program. You don't go out and adjust properties one at a time just because they sold. When you do a reassessment, if you do it right, when you change that neighborhood, you look at those properties and you adjust them accordingly. You don't pick and choose. Now, you may have one house that's depreciated a lot more because it just hasn't been taken care of. That kind of issue comes up. I have found when I have been out and went up to properties, when you're standing on that doorstep, you can see a lot more flaws in that house than you can from the curbside. So I think that part of it needs work. It's unfortunate that everybody doesn't do things like we want them to, but we have to look at how it will affect counties. I want to go back real quickly to if you required in my county or the county I worked in to get permission to go on those properties, it would at least take 1 to 2 people to be on the phone trying to get permission. The thing is, we don't have phone numbers, we don't have emails, and we don't want them because if they're on our records, they become public records, that anybody can sunshine those records and use them for merchandising, for sales gimmicks, whatever they want to do. So all we had was the owner's name and where to send the taxes to. That's all we really wanted, because when you have the data, you got to give it to anybody that wants it. So I look forward to working with you on the bill. You and I have talked a lot about this. You're very cordial about it. I appreciate your approach, and hopefully we can come to some kind of a conclusion on this. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I say one last thing?
Sure.
I would love to work with the committee that this not be the last time we sit down and talk about this. I asked the chair not to move this bill forward until we either come to a consensus in this committee, because I'm a big believer in collective thought on how and what and where, and if we can't come to that consensus in this committee, I don't want the bill on the floor. Okay? After 8 years, I've learned I'd rather do good legislation than 90% okay and 10% bad. So I'm just telling the committee that I'd like to come back. If we come to language and everything, I'd like to present that language again, if I could, sir, and have the committee, then we'll talk about this till the cows come home.
Well, I commend you on, because I've talked to you several times concerning the bill and some of the things I've been hearing, and you have been very open and very honest about what you want to do, and we appreciate that, because I think this committee is intent on helping people perfect their language on their bill to try to get across, if at all possible, your intent. So I appreciate your willingness to work. Okay. Representative Railsback, did you? Okay. Representative Murphy.
Just real quick, as Representative Fischel said, we went into this pretty deeply this summer before last or 2 years ago, and unfortunately, your area is one of the most troubling in the world. One of the things the state statute says that if you raise somebody's property tax more than 15%, you have to do a physical inspection. What your county did was raise 290,000 parcels by 14.9%, so that they didn't have to do that. I'm afraid that the way this is done, what we're going to have is unintended consequences, where everybody's going to get a 14.9% increase in their taxes every year because, well, we can't go on the property. We might want to look at, rather than an opt-out or an opt-in system or an opt-out system, where if you don't want somebody on your property, that you're able to notify them that if they're going to come on your property, they have to be with you physically, rather than just say, no, they can't go on anybody's property, give you the right to say you can't come on my property.
The problem we face, though, is if that's on record, then it becomes unshinable at the assessor's office. And so the question would be, you'd have to know that data could become public, and then the other question says,
right,
it's unshinable, then who and what and
yeah,
where.
This is kind of a ball of goo.
What I realized was,
there's something.
What I realized was, oh, heck. It's easy for us to sit here and talk about it and understand the concept. It's another thing, put it in words and make it work legally. And so,
let's hope we can come up with
you've heard my intent.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms.
All righty.
I'm about to close for you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, you've been doing this a little longer than me. So thank you, sir. And is there anyone here to speak in support of this bill? Is there speak in support? Okay. Make sure that you have your witness forms filled out. Yeah. Okay. Turn your mic.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Registered lobbyist on behalf of the Missouri Association of Realtors. We have long opposed sales price disclosure mandates ever since their infancy in Missouri, and to the extent that this bill would repeal those mandates, we support it. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is there any questions for this witness? Representative Moore?
Hi, sorry, I'll keep this quick. Thank you. I'm just curious, why? If you're
It's
so
a-
opposed to sale price mandates, I'm just curious why.
It's a personal privacy issue.
Okay.
Realtors, as I think you were the one that asked the question earlier,
Okay.
we have access to that to the extent that a licensed real estate agent is part of the transaction through the MLS. But otherwise, we believe that it's a private transaction, and the actual outcome of that transaction should be maintained between those two parties.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is there anyone else to speak in support of this bill? Is there anyone here to speak against this bill? Seeing none, is there anyone to speak in informational purposes only on this bill?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm David Wood. I'm the liaison for the Missouri State Tax Commission. I'm here to provide information on some of the questions and comments that have come up concerning this bill. One, the assessors by the Constitution are required to assess every property, personal and real, in the state of Missouri. So when you remove information that is needed to make that assessment, it makes it very difficult to follow their constitutional obligation. I'm grateful that the sponsor is willing to work on that part of the bill to where the assessors aren't able to go onto the property and make an accurate assessment. Certificate of value. Mentioned it's been in 4 counties. Those are the charter counties. So you have St. Louis County, Jackson County, Jefferson County, and St. Charles County. But that is not in statute that it's required for them to have the COV. It's in their charters for those counties. So in removing it in the statute, and I'm not sure how that's going to affect the charters in those counties, because that's where the requirement comes from. Anytime there's an assessment done, you have the option of an appeal. If you do not like that assessment, there's a process in statute where you can go to the assessor, then you go to the Board of Equalization, then you can always appeal it to the State Tax Commission, and if you're still not happy, you can take that assessment to the courts. So there is a process when you're not happy with what your assessment is that can be followed. I'd be glad to take any questions about the process or what the statutes are concerning the assessments.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That concludes the public hearing on Bill 2419. With that, we're going to move, I asked the committee to give me a little leeway here. We're jumping around a little bit because people have different schedules. We'll now be hearing House Bill 2218. Representative O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee members. Just to kind of set the stage, other than Representative Murphy, you all were here last year when I brought this bill. It was the bill where I showed the video of the YouTuber driving through North St. Louis City, highlighting a lot of the vacant properties there. So House Bill 2218 is meant to simply put...
Representative, make sure your mic is on.
I'll speak.
Or speak
I'll eat it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely on. So House Bill 2218 seeks to reduce the huge number of vacant properties in the city of St. Louis by providing better notice to delinquent property owners and ultimately getting good, clear title for purposes of redevelopment. Currently in the city of St. Louis, and my source here is the website stlvacancy.com, and that's the organization that's tracking the vacancies in the city of St. Louis. They have over 24,000 vacant parcels. Of that, you've got over 10,000 vacant buildings and over 14,000 vacant lots. And in the last 3 years, that's been quite an expense for the city of St. Louis. They have almost $8 million in unpaid property taxes, over $9 million in expenses just keeping up some of these properties. So mowing the lawn, boarding up some of these buildings, demolishing buildings that are dangerous, and then as well as $3.5 million in unpaid vacant building fees and fines, which for the last 3 years is a total of over $20 million. But we're going to also add to that, unfortunately, since the last time I was here testifying on this bill, we're going to add the incalculable price of the loss of a 33-year-old St. Louis City firefighter, Ben Polson, who was killed last month while putting out a fire in one of these vacant buildings in the city of St. Louis. So just some of my observations. When this legislation was first brought to me, I was excited because I had in my head that video you all saw, and that was these huge sections of land where we had vacant property, and I had in my head the opportunity to completely redevelop blocks in North St. Louis City, and we saw some of that in the video as well. You saw these sections that were completely redone and were starting over. But it also kind of hit me that when you look at the stlvacancy.com, and I really encourage you to go there because it's fascinating. It is an amazing resource. You can look at the map of the city of St. Louis, and you see these huge swaths of land that are vacant. These huge sections, entire blocks that are completely vacant. And you move towards the south, and you think, well, the problem's not so bad down there. But that's the beginning. So my vision was rebuilding 40 homes on one block. But you look at maybe a section in South City where there's 40 homes in a block, and you say, oh, it's not so bad. There's only 3 homes there. But that's the start of the cancer. Those property values on that block are already beginning to decline, and that neighborhood's already beginning to decline. And so, initially I was like a kid in a candy store with this huge development, but this bill also helps stop the decline of some of these neighborhoods. Initially, when this was brought to me, I had some concerns. I had this land grab mentality, but what this bill does is it actually puts more requirements in place on the city of St. Louis to actually get notice to these people that are delinquent. And let's face it, in some cases, that's just a matter of reaching out to these people. But in other cases, these people don't want to be found. They don't want to pay these taxes. They're perfectly content to leave these properties vacant. In some cases, you've got speculators that have bought the land, and they're just waiting to get caught so they can go to court and do the minimum catch up in their taxes, and then they're off again to hopefully avoid being caught again and having to get caught up on taxes. They're not focused on redeveloping these neighborhoods. Also, and the word Representative Behringer used last term was anchor. We've got this huge development. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency has taken a huge section of property just northwest of downtown St. Louis, and they're building a brand new facility. And you say, well, that's great. That's a government entity. So what? But if you look at the location of that on the map, the area around that is blighted at best. I mean, it needs to be redeveloped. And what a fantastic opportunity. You might look at it and say, well, that's an intelligence agency. What are you going to do? Maybe build some restaurants for people to go to in the daytime. But as someone in the intelligence community, the intel community isn't just the people in government. There's plenty of opportunity for development there for intelligence contractors to have office space in close proximity to NGA. So I see that as a huge opportunity here. I've been excited, and I was telling one of the lobbyists, I've never had a bill that's had this much support before. The list of letters of support that have been shared with the chairman and some of the committee members has been really exciting to me. And then one last point for you all. You'll be seeing a House committee substitute, and we'll have some of the people that are going to testify just kind of talk about some of the things that are slight changes from this bill from last term. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing this bill back again. I thought it was a great idea the last time we heard it, and I think it's a great idea right now. I mean, we've got to give communities and municipalities every tool we can to try to bring up property in their communities because there's not a silver bullet for any one thing. And so every different way we can attack this problem is the way we need to go. Representative Behringer.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Thank you. All right. I was also excited when you brought this forward last year because as a former elected official in the city of St. Louis, I actually dealt with these issues. And
Thank you for your help in this process. It's been a huge learning
no
for
problem.
me.
And of course, unfortunately, the firefighter was one example. But we also have police issues because we've had children who've been grabbed and then molested in these vacant properties in these neighborhoods. And so if we were able to tear down these buildings, it's a lot easier for the police to police an area that just has land at this point versus sending those police officers into dangerous territory, not knowing who's inside those houses. There's drug dealers, and in this case, with the firefighter, the homeless go in there and they start fires to stay warm, and that's why they catch on fire. Yep. So, but what I want to clarify, because the one thing that seems to confuse people about the city of St. Louis, and it confuses us in the city too, so we're all shared on this one, is that we're a city charter. And the reason all of this has to be brought up here to the state level. So I know a lot of people are like, why do we have to deal with the city? Why do we have to deal with the city? Well, because unfortunately, most of the departments that we need to move this legislation forward, to clean it up, are under state statute. In the city of St. Louis, our collector revenue is a county office. They're under state statute. Our sheriff's office is a county office under state statute. When we go for, I'm trying to think of the other departments, but the treasurer. So they can't do anything without us here at the state level changing it. And the great part was, and we're going to hear from those people, is that they all got together. So every aspect of trying to clean up these very death traps and public safety issues is because each of these departments got together, they formed this group, and they said, okay, on your end, what do you need to clean up? And the collector revenue said this. And the sheriff's office is under state statute. So when they want to serve, somebody who lives in Florida, how do we serve these people that live in Florida that we need to get to come to St. Louis to take care of this property? We can't send sheriffs to Florida. I did send a sheriff, just so y'all know, I did send a sheriff into a hospital to serve somebody in a hospital that on a vacant, private-owned
Don't mess with
property that was falling apart. However, that's why I want to make sure that everyone understands is that if we could do this ourselves in the city of St. Louis, we would, but we can't. Every cleanup of this aspect of this bill is because these departments are under state statute. And we're doing one bill where we're doing just to wrapping it all together and saying we've got to move forward. We have this $500 million coming to the city of St. Louis, and we must redevelop these areas. And there may be one property sitting on 4 blocks that'll hold up the entire thing because we can't get to that owner, and our process is so old that we won't be able to serve them, and then it will go away. And I have personally worked on a piece of property that took 25 years to clean up. That was a private, vacant, dilapidated property. So that's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I would just respond to that. You brought up something that I've neglected to talk about early on. In the last bill, it was mentioned how a lot of this legislation gets tailored to one specific area, or we define things that it ends up being Jackson County only or whatever. The current structure of the statute breaks into three areas. We aren't targeting St. Louis. We're targeting this section in statute. This is broken into 3 categories: City of St. Louis, Kansas City, and the rest of the state. We're just working on this. I know that the chairman would be interested in seeing this go into these other sections, but we're not targeting St. Louis. We're just targeting this section of statute that deals with the city of St. Louis. So thank you.
Any other questions for the representative? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Anyone to speak in support of this bill? Please make sure you have your witness forms filled out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative O'Donnell. Thank you, Representative Behringer, Representative Adams, and so on. My name is Dale Sweet. I'm an attorney in private practice, practicing in the city of St. Louis and elsewhere nearby to the St. Louis area. The 2 things in 2218 really is intended to do 2 things. Make it easier for the government to attack deteriorating properties that are vacant and abandoned more quickly before the back wall falls down, before the firefighter gets caught inside, and so on. And also to clean up the title to the property. So when we have these tax auctions, and I represent investors and sometimes the lady next door who wants to have a swing set or a vegetable garden, or somebody who's a developer or a rehabber, not only are they taking on a dilapidated property that hasn't been cared for and so on, they are also inheriting title problems, liens, encumbrances, old deeds of trust. And so 2218 here does a lot of nerdy, complicated stuff. There's nothing partisan about it, but it actually increases the kinds of due process and private property rights because we know that when the government is taking away our property to pay our tax bill, it absolutely owes the taxpayer due process of law. And to the extent that we are able to increase the burden on city government to reach out to the taxpayer, to her granddaughter, to that shell company in Wyoming and so on, we end up with a greater quality of title so that that developer is able to borrow against the property, get a construction loan to complete the renovations, so that that weekend warrior rehabber is able to sell the property once it's renovated to a person who needs a loan to pay the purchase price. And so the combination of these two things will not be, as we've discussed, a silver bullet, but is intended to stem the tide of dilapidated properties going forward, and to clean up the title so that people are able to have a fighting chance if they decide to take on one of these projects. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else to speak in favor of the bill?
Good morning, everyone. Peter Hoffman, Managing Attorney for Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee, Representative O'Donnell, Behringer, for this legislation. I have been an attorney in nonprofit services for 12 years, serving low-income communities on both sides of the state in Kansas City and in St. Louis. The city of St. Louis has the third worst vacant and abandoned property problem anywhere in the country, with close to 30,000 parcels. It has an incredible impact, negative impact on low-income communities, specifically in the St. Louis area. These neighborhoods need investment, and clear title is a precursor to investment. And so what this legislation would do, as Dale so eloquently put, would clear title. That's the intent of the law, and we clear title by giving people good due process, constitutionally required notice of these tax sales. The city of St. Louis has been doing these types of tax sales since the 1970s. The case law has changed. The Supreme Court has said, governments, if you're going to be taking property away, you need to give more due process. Unfortunately, the statute has not been updated since the 1970s. So really what this legislation is a bit of a facelift. We're updating the statute to incorporate those new enhanced due process standards so that if this property is abandoned and it goes through tax sale, as Dale said, that buyer, whether it's a tax auction or through the city's Land Reutilization Authority, has clear title. They don't need to go hire a lawyer. Here I am as a lawyer saying we're trying to come up with a solution that gets rid of some of the lawyers in the process. They won't need to hire a lawyer, pay thousands of dollars, wait years for a clear title. They'll be able to purchase that property and redevelop it. So this legislation could have a really substantial impact on development in the city of St. Louis. There's one other component to this legislation that I do want to touch on that is statewide, and it's requiring disclosure of a marital status on a title transfer, on a deed conveyance. This portion of the statute does apply statewide, and it's added to really solve one of the most common title problems that we see across the state. Under Missouri law, you need to disclose whether or not you have a marital interest in property or when you sell it. If you do not disclose your marital interest, it creates a title cloud or a title problem. You've then got to go get a lawyer to fix all of that. with the increase of people using internet deeds, Office Depot deeds, things they go buy for $20 at the office supply store, people are doing more of this deed drafting themselves, whereas before it used to be title companies and mortgage companies and attorneys handling these. So over the last maybe 10, 15 years, we've seen a huge increase in people leaving out the marital interest. What this statewide component would do is require a disclosure. So somebody fills out one of those Office Depot deeds, they go to record it, they're about ready to mess up their own title. Well, now the recorder, when they're looking for all of these other requirements for recording, is it signed, is it notarized, are the margins right, is it legible? Well, now they also need to look and see, is there a marital status on here? If not, go ahead and write it in, because we need that to make sure we're preserving the clarity of land title. So this is going to protect a lot of people's property rights, especially if they don't have the resources to go to a lawyer or go to a title company to fix those types of issues. So I just wanted to mention that, because that is the one statewide provision here. As you'll hear others say, this legislation was drafted in part by a nonpartisan coalition comprised of community leaders and attorneys and department heads from various city departments. There have been law professors, title company representatives, all working together to really try to fix this problem for the city of St. Louis. We feel like this might be the once-in-a-generation chance to really move the needle on this issue that the city hasn't been able to get ahead of for so long. So I want to thank you all for introducing the legislation, and hope for your support.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else to speak in favor of House Bill 2218?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Tori Park. Actually, you'll see it as Christine Tori Park. I go by my middle name. I am the director of the St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative, which was mentioned by both Representatives O'Donnell and Berenger. I am here today to give my full support for this bill. The collaborative, as Peter mentioned, is a coalition of over 50 public and private organizations who have come together dedicated to reducing the challenge of vacant properties in the city of St. Louis. I won't take up too much of your time going over some of the items that my fellow coalition members have mentioned so far, but just want to illustrate the point that with 1,000 parcels cycling through the city's tax foreclosure process each year, this legislation has the potential to significantly reduce our inventory of vacant properties and stabilize neighborhoods. The key takeaways of this measure that I'd like to stress are that this will return vacant properties to productive use more quickly. This will improve the ability for buyers to obtain title insurance, and of course, we want to make sure that we are setting people up for success. What that looks like is rehabbing vacant properties is very hard work. This legislation would eliminate several of the hidden risks like undisclosed fees and fines and make that job even harder. So improving the insurability of land titles is an important step in our region's efforts to combat disinvestment and vacancy. Again, myself and the entire Vacancy Collaborative strongly urge the support of House Bill 2218. And I wanted to thank you all for your consideration.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else to speak in support of House Bill 2218?
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Paul Brown. I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 2218. I'm a retired attorney. I keep my license active so I can participate in pro bono activities like this. I spent over 40 years practicing law with the downtown law firm in St. Louis of Thompson Coburn, where I was a partner and a trial attorney. My last year and a half after I retired from Thompson Coburn, I served with the Attorney General Schmidt in the Office of the Attorney General. I was chief of litigation over there. My team of 40 legal professionals representing the state of Missouri, its agencies, its employees, its judges, and its legislators when they're sued. But I am currently not associated with any agency or firm. I'm just an old retired guy. But I am here speaking in my position, or I should say my former position, as the immediate past chair of Lawyers for City Neighborhoods. That is a committee of the Bar Association of Metropolitan St. Louis that I organized about 12 years ago to provide legal resources to neighborhood organizations in the city of St. Louis to combat vacancies and nuisance property issues in residential neighborhoods. A very serious problem that I discovered when I moved from suburbia into downtown St. Louis. That committee has been here twice before, probably before most of you were elected to the House, on legislation that we studied and drafted and successfully passed the first year it was introduced to combat nuisance and vacant property issues in St. Louis. That committee has also then formed the ad hoc, what I call the Blue Ribbon Committee, that studied this issue of non-marketable, unmarketable tax title in the city of St. Louis for over 2 years and developed the legislation. Peter Hoffman, who preceded me in testifying, very ably chaired that committee, and we brought together a group of lawyers and title company officials and city officials and other people who are experts in this field, not just to throw together some legislation, but to study the issue and come up with something that would solve the problem of vacant properties. And we're talking here specifically, a lot of those properties are owned by the land bank in St. Louis. And they own them because they're the owner of last resort. When nobody else wants the property, the land bank gets it. And what can the land bank do with unmarketable title? Nothing. Now, you know, as a trial attorney, my first line of questioning of every witness was ask them about their background, their experience, and what I call their viewpoint bias. And I think it's only fair that I share with this committee my viewpoint bias, and that is I'm a conservative Republican, and I support this bill because I think it brings conservative Republican values into the city of St. Louis to solve a long-standing problem. I was a Republican committeeman for over 10 years in the strongest, biggest Republican township in the state of Missouri. Well, maybe one of the two top. My friend Jane Claridge would take issue with me calling it the biggest. I was on the state committee. I attended numerous conventions and caucuses as a delegate, district, state, national. Most recently in 2016, I chaired my township caucus. And I represented the Republican Party in lawsuits, 2 redistricting lawsuits and 1 ballot security lawsuit. And my clients won all 3 of those cases. So I'm here as a bona fide conservative Republican telling you, you can take my word that this legislation brings conservative values into the city of St. Louis to solve a very big problem. How does it do that? First, it protects the property interest of private property owners. This problem of non-marketable title is a result of the existing statutory framework that you all are responsible for, because the city of St. Louis can't change it. Only this House and Senate, with the signature of the governor, is going to change this situation. So what happened is the Supreme Court cast some doubt on the efficacy of the existing statutes to provide adequate due process, that's constitutional, due process notice to owners of property that are subject to tax sale, and failure to give them adequate opportunity to cure the defects. So by this bill curing the defects in giving adequate due process notice to property owners, it also cures the defect in title. Why is title defective when you haven't given adequate due process notice? That means if there's a property sold at tax sale and you go in and you buy it, you could be sued several years later by somebody that comes out of the woodwork that said, I have an ownership interest in that property, and I did not receive adequate due process notice. That's not good either for the property owner or for the person that has just bought it. Consequently, title companies will not provide title insurance for these properties. Bankers and lending agencies will not loan money on them. Developers aren't going to risk their assets and their effort in developing this property. And individual homeowners, which drives a lot of the redevelopment in the city of St. Louis, individuals who put their life savings at risk and put their sweat equity into a piece of property, won't buy these properties. They shouldn't buy the properties. There may be a few, but they shouldn't be. So this bill will allow people to begin investing. We're talking about private capital. We're talking about private initiative. We're talking about no increase in taxes. We're talking about no increase in the number of employees, government employees, and we're talking about no expansion of the scope of government. That's what I call conservative Republican values, and I hope this committee will pass House Bill 2218. Glad to take questions. My written testimony includes my cell phone number and my email. I'd be glad to correspond with anybody off the mic later.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else to speak in favor of House Bill 2218?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jackie Barget. I am the registered lobbyist for the City of St. Louis. I will not repeat anything that has been said so far, but just want to emphasize the broad support there is for this legislation throughout the city.
Any question for this witness? Thank you very much. Anyone else to speak in support of House Bill 2218?
Morning again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jason Zamkus, registered lobbyist on behalf of the Missouri Association of Realtors. For all the reasons previously stated, we'd like to go on record in support of the legislation.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else to speak in favor of House Bill 2218? Seeing none, anyone to speak against House Bill 2218? Seeing none, anyone to speak for informational purposes for House Bill 2218? Seeing none, this concludes the portion for House Bill 2218 public hearing. We'll now move to House Bill 1606. Representative McGaugh.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. It's nice to be in front of a very friendly committee about local government. This particular bill, this is the third time I've had it. Twice in front of local government, and last year it went before elections and elected officials because it does refer to job duties of an elected official, but I specifically asked to come back to local government because it saves the county money. It's not just about doing a job. So I'm sure you have read the synopsis. It's a simple bill. We all like to say that, but this one truly, truly is. This bill simply requires that all non-charter counties by the first Monday in March to prepare and publish in a qualified newspaper a financial statement for the previous year. I'm sure you've all seen them. The fact of the matter is it's a lot of work. They don't mind doing the work. Now with the computers, the numbers are already there, but by the time they publish them, people have asked to see I guess I didn't put it back in here. I'm in 3 places at one time, by the way, right now at 8 o'clock. So it's a huge document. What I did in Carroll County was had the newspaper do a pullout, and so it was a bit cheaper there. But the fact of the matter is the first-class counties are allowed to do a shortened version of that. It's an abbreviated version that basically has the same information. The additional information in the third-class financial statement is every check. every check number and every check for every expenditure, which means sometimes it's like $10. It could be a check for less than $1, which just takes up room in a published financial statement. The best part about this bill, I believe, is the relationship that I gained with the Missouri Press Association. I know as a former county clerk, it was tough a lot of times to, what's the saying, buck the guy that buys the ink by the barrel. But they have been more than willing to work with me on this. They know that it will reduce the amount of income to some of their small local papers. But they also know that in this bill, the clerk or the officer responsible for preparation of this document is going to provide them, the press, with a thumb drive or whatever medium they need that on, and they'll be able to use that information in different ways. For example, if they want to do a story about the sheriff buying 5 vehicles and borrowing money, beyond his budget, they can then at that point have that information available to them rather than perusing through this to add up the totals. So I've been very pleased that the Missouri Press Association has been here to testify in support of what I have, and I have no further information unless you have questions. It's just simply to save the county's money. The information will be there at any point with anyone that wants to ask for the particular, how much was this particular check for, or the culmination of all the checks. It'll be there. It just won't be published in a newspaper in that way.
Any questions for the representative? Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you for bringing this forward. It is a money saver. Being in county government for 18 years, it was just a cost that we burdened, and nobody really paid much attention to it. The one question I would have, like the special road districts, that's part of the county's financial statement or part of the reporting process. Do they have to have their information in the newspaper once a year? Would that still be an option, or would they still have to do that themselves, or how would that be?
Representative Berger, I'm not sure about that, and I have always appreciated your support. And the reason why I don't know this, in my counties, we don't have special road districts, but we do have township form of government. And I can tell you that the township's expenses, revenue and expenses, were never part of the county financial statement. And they were only required to do a shortened totals, which is about this big with some. So I can find out through research if this is something that will also affect them.
Yeah, like for ourselves in Scott County, we also had printed the health departments, and it was a small block. It wasn't check by check. It was just a overview of what this is concerning. And most people are concerned about what elected officials make.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. So the other thing that the Press Association agreed with was that most people want to spread that out at McDonald's or wherever in the small counties, the coffee shop, and zero in on what a county official makes. A lot of times just to be nosy, but a lot of times to, divvy up for if they were going to run for a particular office. The problem with how it was printed in the financial statement was it was net, not gross. And if you had a lot of deductions for different things, you weren't really getting the true amount of what an official made. And that may have been purposeful. But in this now new bill with the shortened version, that is something that will be there. It will be the gross salary of every county elected official.
And I think that is good because net salaries is what was produced. And if you looked at the commissioner's salaries, some of them may vary $10,000 based on their deductions, like you said. So it was kind of skewed. But I appreciate you bringing this forward, and I'm in complete support. I'd urge the committee to be in support also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Walshmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about, I understand everything that's going in. There are large sections crossed out, a lot of particularly about warrants and things. Can you just kind of explain that?
So this is the first time you and I have ever had, bill in committee at the same time, and I am not in any way insulting your intelligence when I ask you, do you think a warrant in this instance means something through the court?
I don't, no, I understand what it's pertaining to.
A warrant
I was
is a
just the
check.
warrants issue, like, it's with the check, and so
Yes.
it's just, so that's what you're all
Yes.
taking out.
Taking out all the references
Right.
to anything about the expenses that are written by check, and years ago, it was all done by warrant in the small counties.
Right.
The clerk or whoever would write the checks, but they'd give it to the treasurer to actually pay through a warrant out of the fund.
Right. And so so this part that's going out, that was, I'm not familiar with the the newspaper in general, the initial, what it used to look like. So what you're taking, this used to consist of like every check and every.
Yes. I found it. I was,
Okay. Okay.
So it will go from this to or like this.
Okay, yeah, okay.
If you looked at the fiscal note, sorry. If you looked at the
I
fiscal
did, I noticed a
note,
substantial savings.
it is
That's what
substantial,
I
and
was-
it's to the counties, not the state.
Right,
So, and
right.
that's why it's
And
very
they need-
important.
Okay, that was my question, was I was like, there's all this information that's,
Yes.
it's like 3 pages are being eliminated. And I was just wanting to make sure, so this used to, so yeah, thank you for the visual, because I was like,
Yeah.
did they put
It is
every
good.
single, I mean, just,
Yeah.
here's our ledger.
Right,
for public,
basically it
which
was.
I'm all for the transparency, but does it really need to be in the newspaper?
Right.
Okay.
Especially, I mean, anyone can ask for public information,
Right.
FOIA now, and get what was paid to the election judges, for example. Any of those things, which shows you that statute is so old that it was pre-computer, pre-anything, when they were producing warrants and checks by hand.
Right. Okay, well, thank you, that answers my question.
Any other questions? Representative Reedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just kind of want to make a comment about this. I know you've had this bill before. It was a good bill the first time you had it. It's still a good bill, and it will help counties a lot. Thank you for bringing it forward and being persistent in helping the small counties, because a lot of times, if it cost them, I'm going to throw a number out there, but if it cost them $2,000 or $3,000 to print this, they may need that money to balance their general revenue fund when they budget. So thank you, Representative, for bringing this.
Thank you, Representative, and I have always appreciated your support, and being from county government yourself, you know how important just a few dollars means to a small county. This coming to the state from the county, I can see that we are awfully bad at the state level to push the expense off to the county level. We do it practically every day. It happens on the floor, and those of us from county government, look at each other and shake our heads. So this definitely will be a bill that won't affect the state at all, but will definitely help our counties.
Any other questions for the representative? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone to speak in support of House Bill 1606?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Chris Shropey here on behalf of the Missouri Association of County Clerks and Election Authorities. We are very supportive of this piece of legislation. Appreciate Representative McGall's hard work to get an agreement worked out with the Press Association. Very appreciative of their work to get this figured out because of all the reasons stated. We're lucky to have an expert like Representative McGall on this topic, and very supportive. It passed 142-7 out of the House last year, and would like to see favorable passage out of the House again this year. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else to speak in favor of House Bill 1606?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Steve Hobbs. I'm a registered lobbyist. I represent over 1,400 elected officials with the Missouri Association of Counties, and we're here to testify in support of this legislation. This has been a priority for the Missouri Association of Counties for several years, and I applaud the efforts also of Representative McGaugh and the other members working on this legislation, also the Press Association. As you could see by the visuals there, it's quite a burden, and literally every check that a county did was run in the paper. We actually were finding when I was in county government in my county, which is just up Highway 54 here, a little bit bigger county than Representative McGaugh came from, but 14 pages in the local newspaper at $10,000. And quite frankly, we were having trouble getting papers to bid on it because they really didn't want to fool with it. And so that's become an issue in a lot of other communities. I also wanted to address a comment from Representative Berger on whether or not special road districts were required to put theirs in the paper. In the county that I used to be presiding commissioner at, they are not required to put any of that stuff in the paper. They do not fall under this for those special road districts. So be happy to answer any questions.
Any question for this witness? Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To inquire,
Proceed.
what about the health departments that fall under the guise of the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, some health departments, if they fall under the county's umbrella, they're included in that. But like in a lot of counties, those health departments are standalone agencies and they're not required.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else to speak in support of House Bill 1606?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mark Mawson with the Missouri Press Association. As you know, Missouri Press represents the 201 newspapers in the state. We're in support of this bill. In fact, the bill sponsor, Representative McGaugh, was a guest at one of our board meetings to discuss this, and the board has agreed to the language, and we have shared it with all of our membership, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else to speak in support of House Bill 1606? Seeing none. Anyone to speak against House Bill 1606? Seeing none. Anyone to speak for informational purposes only for House Bill 1606? Seeing none. That concludes the committee hearing for House Bill 1606. We will now move to House Bill 1918. Representative Hovis. Proceed when ready.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for hearing this bill today. House Bill 1918. Again, Barry Hovis, Southeast Missouri District 146.
Representative, make sure you speak into the mic and that it's on.
Okay, light is on, so I'll speak a little louder here.
Okay.
Appreciate you hearing House Bill 1918. This bill was presented last year as House Bill 804 and heard by the committee, and they did pass it out. Basically what this bill does, it deals with sewer districts. There's several different kinds or variations of sewer districts in the state of Missouri. This one will actually affect one of the sewer districts I have in Cape Girardeau County, District 146, which is the Fruitland Reorganized Sewer District. Currently, the trustees, and we're going to talk about the three different boards quickly because I don't want to take up a lot of your time. The trustees of a 5-member board of common sewer districts may be paid a reasonable compensation for their services outside their duties as a trustee. That's some very unique boards they've got in the state, if approved by a resolution of the Board of Trustees. The trustee of a 10-member board of trustees of common sewer districts or organized sewer districts and the trustees of reorganized common sewer districts cannot receive any compensation for their services. This bill allows the trustees of both common and reorganized common sewer districts to be paid up to $100 per meeting, but not for more than 2 meetings per calendar month. Currently, the trustees of reorganized common sewer districts receive no compensation for their services. So this bill would allow those trustees to now be paid for up to $100 per meeting, but not more than 2 meetings per calendar month of the district for their services. Plus, the trustees can be reimbursed for their actual expenses. This was brought to me by the president of Fruitland Sewer District 3 years ago, I guess now in counting, and they could get no one to serve on this board. They had a $17 million project, and he says, Barry, he goes, there's organized sewer districts that can receive, at that time, I think it's $50. I may be off. I'll have to go back and look at my notes. And then there's other districts that actually receive more, but because of the way they were announced in statute. And then we've got the reorganized sewer districts, which got no money for serving on the board. And ultimately, we couldn't get anybody to serve on the board. I think they appointed many of them that are now on that. He asked me if we could maybe streamline this across the industry there. So I contacted House Research. They helped me look into water districts. Theirs is set at $100. We looked at some organized. I think they were 50, I believe. I can't remember. So we were just going to try to raise it up so that water districts, reorganized sewer districts, and organized sewer districts, not mentioned in statute already, could receive up to $100 per meeting per month, or up to $200 if they have 2 meetings. This bill is not to cause problems for any standing sewer districts. There will be a gentleman talking after me here in just a moment, Mr. Ropey, who has Little Valley Sewer District. They were going to be affected by this. They already have a unique setup there, and so I brought an amendment. I don't think this is the right time for it. We wanted to address that, but I want to make sure that when he talks about this, you know it's available for whenever we get ready to talk more about this. But on page 3 of the bill, it will just address a county of first classification with a charter form of government with over 63,000 or 350,000. Anyway, it addresses the Blue Springs. I think they're served by mayors. I'm just going to let him talk about it for informational purposes. Anyway, that will exempt that particular district out of this. And I don't think there's any other districts that are affected adversely. There's not to be, it's not meant to affect anybody adversely, but just to fix the problem that we had with the Fruitland district down there. I'd be happy to take any questions. Again, I think this bill passed out last year, I think unopposed, if I remember correctly, but again, I'd have to look at my notes. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the representative? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone to speak in support of House Bill 1918?
Mr. Chairman, if you would indulge me, could I testify for informational purposes real quick? I've got to run to another hearing, but I wanted to just make sure everyone understood in a little more detail what the representative
That'd be
was saying.
fine.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Chris Ropey, I'm registered lobbyist for the Little Blue Valley Sewer District, which was created at the request of DNR back in the early 90s. Basically, it's all of the municipalities in eastern Jackson County, so some of the largest cities in our state, Lee Summit, Blue Springs, Independence, and goes down into even rural Cass County. We have our own section of statute. We aren't organized. We aren't a reorganized sewer district. It's a very large sewer district with very large customers. We run a very tight ship and operation, and we just kind of want to, things are going great, and we don't need to be affected by this, and we worked with the sponsor. The amendment does eliminate us when we were accidentally included in his original filed bill, so we appreciate that and would like your favorable consideration of the amendment to take us out of the bill. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
Anyone to speak in support of House Bill 1918? Your name, please.
Trent Ford.
Okay. Thank you.
Registered lobbyist for the Missouri Association of Sewer Districts. Probably should have said that first. Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to get the briefly out there since.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else to speak in support of House Bill 1918? Seeing none. Anyone to speak against House Bill 1918? Seeing none. Anyone else to speak in for informational purposes only on House Bill 1918? Seeing none, that concludes the committee hearing on House Bill 1918. We'll now move to House Bill 2291. Representative Reedy, when you're ready. I thought we could.
Thank you, Chairman Faulkner, Ranking Member Adams, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Roger Reedy. I represent District 57 in West Central Missouri, Northern Benton, all of Henry, part of Cass, and part of Bates County. And I'm here today to present House Bill 2291. This is the third year I've had this bill. And basically what it does, the bill authorizes certain cities, which these are two cities in my district, Lincoln and Clinton, upon voter approval to impose a sales tax up to 0.5% on all retail sales for the purpose of improving public safety, including but not limited to equipment, city employee salaries and benefits, and facilities for police, fire, and emergency medical providers. A little bit about this bill. My district sits on the northern shores of Truman Lake and Lake of the Ozarks. On any given weekend, we can double in population. Lincoln and Clinton are both towns that does that very thing. I talked to each one of these cities as they requested me to do this. It's an authorization to let them decide at the local level what, if they want to put it on the ballot, their voters have to approve it. So we're not imposing a tax. We're just giving local control for this. I talked to the city of Lincoln and what they want to do, and I want to tell you, I think it's important to know what they're going to do with this money if they do approve a tax. They want to add an officer to work with the school as a resource officer. It's a small town of about 1,050 people, and they would work with them, partner with the school, and then also use that officer on the weekends as the workload increases, which that's typical in your lake areas and your tourist areas. The city of Clinton has the situation there. In August of 2017, an officer was shot in the line of duty. He, on a traffic stop, was killed, and it was really hard on that community, a community of 9,000 people. A young officer that had been there came back to Clinton to help out the force, and with a domestic call in just 7 months later, in early 18, this officer was killed, and the gunman held the other officers at bay until the first officer bled to death, and then he turned the gun on himself. 2 years ago, the prosecuting attorney from Henry County testified, I believe, to this committee that someone asked him, was there anything that could have maybe prevented that from happening? And he said if they would have had equipment, if they would have had shields where they could have tried to go in and get that wounded officer out of that house that night, but they couldn't do it. So they've got to attract officers. It's really kind of hard to want to go there when things like this happen. And they also wanted to update equipment so they're better equipped when things like this happen. And so, like I said, we're not imposing the tax. We're just giving the cities the ability to put it on the ballot and let their citizens decide. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for this representative? Representative West?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Reedy, thank you for bringing this forward. I think it's very important. I just have one question, and it's not meant to be argumentative in any way. Are there any fail-safes in this that will keep them from defunding the departments in other areas and using this money to replace that?
I don't believe in the language that is specifically written in there. I will say it earmarks that money for that specific purpose. In Clinton, after these things happened, they tried to run a general sales tax. They told the public that it would be used for public safety, but the citizens said, we want something that is earmarked for public safety.
Would they be willing to put that type of language in there? I want this to happen, and I want them to get what they need, but I have also seen where, with pressure from outside sources, that these departments will take that money. We have problems in St. Louis City, St. Louis County right now where they pass bills to raise money for police departments, and they're stripping out the rest of the budgets and replacing it with this that they promised the people they would, and they are. But
I would be willing to put that in the bill and bring it back.
Or at least on the language on the ballot. You know, I don't know what the legalities are of that, but
okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, though. Thank you.
Yeah, I would think that would be something that the local municipality would want to take a look at. I don't know if it's our position to require that. Representative Murphy?
Yeah, in St. Louis County, we passed Prop P, which was to
to support public safety. And the definition of public safety became so broad that it became paying for the staff of council members, staff, and things like that. So defining what public safety is, I think if you leave it up to the counties, you know, they decided potholes were public safety. So, you know, if you're gonna let them raise money for police, you know, we have to make sure that it actually gets to them. You know, just a comment.
I agree with you.
Any other questions for the representative? Representative Berger?
To inquire, please.
Proceed.
Thank you. Representative Reedy, what about if they want, at some point in time, they decided they wanted this to be 1%? They don't think 0.5% enough for that funds. Should that be worded where it's just a % of increase?
My bill specifies up to 0.5%, so it caps it at 0.5%.
Okay.
So it does not really give them an option to go higher than that.
Okay.
Any other questions for the representative? Seeing none, thank you, Representative. Is there anyone to speak in support of House Bill 2291? Seeing none, is there anyone to speak against House Bill 2291? Seeing none, is there anyone to speak for informational purposes only for House Bill 2291? Seeing none, Representative, did you want to close with anything?
Thank you all. We've had a great local government hearing today, and thank you for hearing me out again.
Okay, that concludes the committee hearing for House Bill 2291, and with no other items before the committee is adjourned.